Nice.
Where's here? Where are you?
I'm currently in St. Louis. I'm visiting family.
Okay.
And so the museum opened today, I think. The St. Louis Museum of Art.
Oh, I'm not sure. I've been in the house.
Okay. Yeah, I think they announced that they're opening today or tomorrow.
Oh, I'll try to see it before I leave. That and Cam.
And you know there's an exhibition of African American abstraction there right now?
Yeah, it was actually curated in part by another Donnelly Fellow named Alexis Assam, who's now at the Philadelphia Museum of Art.
Oh, awesome. I didn't know that, DK.
She's great if you ever get the chance to meet her.
And okay, great. Thank you. What's she doing at the PMA?
She's a fellow there now. She took Tyler Shine's position, if you're familiar with Tyler Shine.
Yeah.
I can't remember what that position is called, but I know it's a fellowship.
Cool.
It's the Clayton.
That exhibition at the St. Louis Museum is the collection of Ron Ollie, who passed away a few weeks ago.
I was
And
just
a lot of Brandywine prints are in that exhibition. He was an early collector from Brandywine.
Oh, there are Brandywine prints in that gift?
Oh, a lot of them, yeah.
Oh, great.
The abstract
There's a
African
catalog,
American.
Alan? Do you know if there's a catalog?
Yes, there's a catalog.
Wait,
Yes,
do you have it? I mean, have you seen
Yeah, I
it?
have the catalog.
I've seen it online, but I don't have a copy.
Okay. All right. I couldn't find it. Okay. Thanks.
And it's the Constance Clayton Fellowship.
It's a beautiful, Abby, we might just want to wait a few more minutes. It's a beautiful, beautiful Friday morning. Just a few more minutes to see. Who else.
I like whoever's adding a soundtrack there.
I have to baking the greens, cooking the greens. Hi, Sarah McEnany. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Brooke.
Hi. Nice to see you this morning.
Shelley Langdale, you got time to participate in this? She can't hear me, can she?
No, she's probably muted.
Can you unmute her for a minute? I just want to give a shout out to her.
Hi.
Hey, Shelley, it's Allan.
How are you?
I'm doing fine. You got time on a Friday morning to join this
Anything for
conversation?
you.
Isn't that something?
Hi, Shelley.
Hey, Brooke. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to see you here.
Good to see you. I miss you guys.
We miss you a lot,
Yeah.
but I know you're rocking and rolling down there.
Well, we got lots going on. That's for sure.
Okay. Allan, are you ready to
Bella
have
Jones is on? Wow.
Allan? We're going to get
Yes.
started if you're good with that. Abby's going to
Sure.
introduce the morning,
Lovely.
get us kicked in.
Welcome, everyone. We wanted to just give it a second to let so many people join the call. It's so nice to see so many of you today on for another Coffee and Culture, today on Community and Collaboration. For any of you who don't know me, I'm Abby King, Assistant Director of Adult Programs here at PAFA. And I want to first start our program by thanking all of our members on the call. I see quite a few of you here with us. So thank you to all PAFA members. If you haven't already, think about joining. I'll drop a link in the chat in just a second, but thanks for helping us keep us PAFA strong, especially during this special time we're all in. I did want to quickly say that today's call, we might have a slightly shorter Q&A. We have so much to cover, Brooke and Allan, and we have some special guests who are also going to be speaking. So feel free during the program, if you have questions or thoughts, to drop them in the chat. We've already had a couple people start that as well, but I'm going to just officially welcome everyone. So as we're going, feel free to put links, thoughts, ideas in here as well. We will have a few minutes at the end. We don't run out of time if you want to ask questions by unmuting yourself, but we will ask that you raise your hand virtually. So the way you do that is click on the participant button, and then on the right-hand side, you'll have an option to raise hands. But again, feel free to just drop things in the chat as well if that feels more comfortable. I know Brooke has a beautiful PowerPoint of images from the Making Community exhibition that we're so excited to share with all of you. So I would recommend for the beginning portion of the program to be in speaker view. So if I'm the big head at the bottom of your screen, to have it in that view so you can see both our speakers and the PowerPoint. And then feel free to switch between that and gallery view by the upper right-hand corner of your screen if you'd like to see everybody. So right now I can see a beautiful swatch of our participants here today, but just know that either setting, whatever works for you, we're happy you're here with us today. Other than that, I did want to mention quickly that we are recording today's event. So if you know of anyone who can't be with us today, we put all of our videos up on our PAFA YouTube channel. So I'll drop a link to that in just a second. I do want to mention though that means that we are live, we are recording. So if you'd like to mute your camera, you're welcome to do that. If you'd like to not be on the recording, that's at the bottom of your screen. Other than that, if you have questions, thoughts, again, feel free to drop them in. I'm going to drop that membership link I mentioned now. And again, we're so happy to have so many of you here with us on this holiday. So it's now my pleasure. I'm going to hand it over to our museum director, Brooke Davis-Anderson, who's going to more formally introduce Allan Edmunds, the founder of Brandywine Workshop and Archives. But I wanted to thank you both for being here with us. Brooke, I'm going to make sure to unmute you. There we go.
Okay, great. Thanks, Abby. Good morning, everyone. It's always great to see a gathering on a Friday morning at the end of a very long work week. And today is especially meaningful as the holiday of Juneteenth. So we're starting off the day, I think, in a wonderful conversation with one another. And so welcome to Culture and Coffee. Grab your coffee and a mug and join me in gearing up for a replenishing and healthy Friday together. My guest this morning is Allan Edmunds. Allan is known to, I think, everyone on this call. He is the founder and executive director of the Brandywine Workshop and Archives. Now, the thing is Allan's website right now says that he's the interim executive director of the Brandywine Workshop and Archives, but I'll believe it when I see it. Because since I arrived in Philly, Allan, you've been talking about retiring and you're busier than ever. So we look forward to seeing how else your career shifts and changes in the years to come. 2019 was such a great year at PAFA, and it partly was a great year because of our partnership with Allan and with the Brandywine Workshop and Archive. And that partnership was generated by a very generous gift from Winston and Carolyn Lowe, and I was hoping they would get on the call.
Winston's
oh, Winston, I see you there now. Good morning, Winston.
Morning, good morning, Abby. Good morning, everyone. And Allan as well.
Nice to see you this morning.
And everyone.
Well, Winston and Carolyn were key to one of the most important partnerships of last year, 2019, with a gift to PAFA of nearly 36 fine art prints from the Brandywine Workshop and Archive. That gift led to several different projects that we worked upon in 2019. The gift led to PAFA working with two fellows from Clark Atlanta University in Atlanta, to TK Smith and Nzinga Simmons, who I think TK is on the call, and I hope Nzinga will join us. TK and Nzinga spent a semester at PAFA working closely with the entire museum team, led ably by Dr. Brittany Webb, our curator of the John Roden collection, and so many other things. And I think Brittany is also on the call this morning. TK and Nzinga, their primary project, they did a lot of things, as everybody at PAFA does, but their primary project was to build an inventory of the prints by African-American artists produced at Brandywine, which enabled us to work with the Lowes and Allan on a selection of prints that were gifted to PAFA. So TK and Nzinga, if you have anything to contribute, if you want to share this morning, we are eager to hear from you again, just as we've been hearing from you for the past year. That inventory and that gift enabled the museum, through the efforts of Jody Throckmorton, our curator of contemporary art, to make a selection which Paola Morciani, our director of the Brodsky Center, who's also on the call this morning, worked with the museum. We had such a great time working with Paula. She's a complete consummate pro, and she guest curated the exhibition, Making Community, prints from the Brandywine Workshop and Archive, Paulson Fontaine Press, and the Brodsky Center at PAFA, an exhibition that celebrated the entry of hundreds of works of art into our permanent collection that privileged women and artists of color just over the last 2 years. Making Community is unfortunately not going to be reopening due to COVID-19. So I hope many of you saw the exhibition before we were all forced to close the museum in mid-March. It did have a run of about 6.5 weeks before we were all caused to close. So what Allan and I are hoping is, after we have a conversation, is that Paula and Winston and Carolyn and TK and Nzinga and Brittany and Jody, if any of you have anything you want to add in this morning's conversation, we would love to hear from you. So Allan, with that, I thought I would start our PowerPoint. Is there anything you'd like to say before I do that? Oh, you're gonna have to unmute, sorry.
Allan, I'm asked to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Well, always I want to begin with thanking you, Brooke, and Paolo for putting the exhibition together, the museum's entire staff support, and of course the Lowe's for making a donation. That's first and foremost. And I'm sad that the exhibition of the 3 workshops won't be able to be seen by more of the general public, but this effort at least provides more documentation about this, what I think is a really high significance for the exhibition, because in all of the works, we're not really looking at printmakers per se, we're looking at artists who use the print medium to make art. And I think that's very important when you, if one had a chance to look at the exhibition, I think that would come out very strongly. Not looking at prints traditionally, but looking at them as another expressive medium where artists can, produce and innovate and, share their stories. So thank you for that. Beyond that, if you've got some questions, Brooke, I'm excited to answer them.
Great. So I'm going to share the screen and we'll have that conversation with the PowerPoint first. So give me a moment. Abby, is that up?
Looks perfect.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. And of course, again, just a shout out to our members who we are always happy to see at these programs. And I just have to show off the work of Sarah Spencer, who works in the museum. She's given this a logo and an identity, culture and coffee. So we've become official now. So Allan, this is the opening of the exhibition, Making Community. And in the photo, for everyone who hasn't had an opportunity yet to meet Paola Morciani, to the left in the blue shirt, our director of the Brodsky Center at PAFA, and she's sharing the image with Winston Lowe and Carolyn Lowe. Winston's a member of our board of trustees at PAFA. And Winston, along with Carolyn, made this very generous gift to the museum. And the gift actually was the impetus for the exhibition. We were so thrilled to add these artists to the collection, add these works to the collection. And it really did lead to the idea of making community. So Allan, I thought I would start with this slide. And you've been such a key member of the community in Philadelphia. Talk a little bit about the impulse to start Brandywine nearly 50 years ago.
50 years ago. Well, Philadelphia's always had a long tradition of printmaking, beginning with Benjamin Franklin and the first print, which was the 13 colonies represented by a snake in 13 sections, which many people consider the first print made in the colonies. And of course, PAFA the oldest art museum and teaching institution for art in the country. So there's always been this deep legacy. The Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Free Library of Philadelphia having a collection from the WPA. And then you have these universities and art colleges, all of which inside this city and surrounding suburban colleges and universities, always been a sense that printmaking was in the curriculum. It was always being offered. So we've had it taught, and we've had a lot of people that have graduated and stayed here because we have the institutional support for that. But for me personally, the reason behind starting Brandywine Workshop was the sense of building a community around a process that was collaborative and making sure that it was diversity driven so that people of color would have an opportunity to have a source for institutional support where there was none. Secondarily, also for me, was if I could be successful at building a sustainable institution, it was desperately needed within the African American community because we were coming out of the civil rights movement and we didn't have a lot of institutions. We have the church, we have some businesses, we had some national organizations like the NAACP, but we didn't have many institutions. And I think one of the ways that you fight marginalization and you command respect is to have institutions to support what your artists do. Institutions that believe in inclusiveness, institutions that give them an opportunity to produce, exhibit, share, and to be documented so that the legacy and the contributions that they were making to American art wouldn't be in control or the hands of someone else. And so that was very important for me. Never did I think I'd be here this long, but it's a journey of which I still remain excited about. And thank God I've got the health and I'm still energetic. I can put that effort out. And, but those are some of the things that in 1972, when we started, were the thinking, the strategy behind it. But then the emphasis came from places like the Print Center, which operated the Prints in Progress program in community settings. My meeting Kippy Stroud, who later went on to develop the Fabric Workshop. So there was just a lot of energy, a lot of people who felt that printmaking could contribute either in a community setting or a collaborative virtual kind of community among artists that it could be built on. So those are some of the things.
Thank you, Allan. Now, when we were preparing for the talk this morning with everyone, you were talking about the installation of Making Community that Paula and the museum team collaborated on. So I thought I'd show one image. This is the image from the Brandywine section of Making Community because there were 3 workshops we were honoring in that exhibition. Is there anything you want to say about the installation? Because you had some things to say about it.
Sure, I'm happy that Paolo's on this call so I can, I don't know how strongly or how often I've had a chance to thank Paolo for her installation. The first thing that caught me was the boldness of the color, the assertiveness of the color. And then the fact that it was held in one of the major galleries at PAFA. I think this is the best installation I've ever seen of a print exhibition. They usually are segregated into the smaller, lower ceiling galleries. And so just the grandeur of the space, the spacing between the artwork, the framing, the color of the backdrop, I think made for a very impressive and respectful presentation of the work. Often printmaking is considered less than, painting and sculpture. But as you'll see in some of the other examples, at Brandywine and I think at the other shops, we tend to look at it, it's expressive potential and not as something that is relegated to a certain size and a certain flatness, that you can be very experimental, that if you come to the medium as an artist and printmaking is not your primary medium and you work in ceramics such as, I can't remember the name, the next one of the slides you have, the artist that was a ceramicist, and making something dimensional out of paper and color that kind of resonates with the work that the artist does in another medium, or a Sam Gilliam painting where he actually makes each print almost like a monoprint because he's adding hand applied paint and so forth to it in collage. So that's what we hoped to demonstrate over the years at Brandywine, that printmaking didn't have to be 22 by 30 and didn't have to be two-dimensional. It could be much better. In this picture on the left side, you see the John Biggers triptych, which he hand drew each color separation, and he designed it so that it could be shown as a triptych like here, but also the two end panels could join together and make a diptych, and the center panel could exist as a single piece by itself. So within the formatting, just the idea of formatting and be able to switch around and interchange pieces, this is just another way in which, you know, we saw options for the artists that perhaps they didn't think about when working in another medium. So.
And next to the John Biggers, Allan, is just a gorgeous portrait of a young boy by Samela Lewis. And, you know, she is foundational to our understanding of American art history. And I wonder, what was it like working with Samela Lewis?
Well, I talk to Samela at least once a month, sometimes every other week. She's about 96 now.
Yep.
She goes to her studio behind her home every day and paints. But Samela Lewis is, her and David Driscoll are the two senior most and most accomplished African-American art historians, because they go back to the first generation of studying, producing catalogs and biographies and exhibitions. And she's professor emeritus from Scripps College in Los Angeles, retired several years ago. But what's amazing about her and Dr. Driscoll is, through all the scholarship and all the teaching at a university level and all the demands that brought upon them, they always produce their work. Always produce their work. And Samela has always produced prints. So we were very happy to be able to work with her on a couple occasions. And her enthusiasm when she's in the studio, because then you have the collaboration, you have the printers, the master printers and the assistants. And a lot of times artists don't get the benefit of that. They mostly work in solitary, they're on their own. I think when you got multiple people in the same space, the chance for feedback is immediate. I know many of the artists invited that feedback. One of the best artists for doing that was Sam Gilliam, who would always ask even the high school students, if they were there racking prints or something, he'd say, "What do you think?" And they would be shocked. So the sense of community brought about by that, by crossing generational, what would be considered generational boundaries, you know, in a normal setting, didn't exist. And that was a very, you know, strong positive attribute of having people like Samela, who could be the scholar, but who could be the struggling artist trying to make something happen on a piece of paper. So, yeah.
And just the notion, if we could just hover around the idea of being 96 years old and going to the studio that's in the back of her home. It's sort of a little, a beautiful building, a sort of garage studio space.
Right, exactly.
In Los Angeles. I have to wonder if it's the New Orleans water, because she is originally from New Orleans, but
Right.
Amazing, 96 years old and still working every day. It's kind of a nice segue to another grande dame of American art history, Howard Deaner Prindell, who's only 77, to Samela Lewis, 96.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about Katrina, the work we're looking at here, and when you found artists working on important moments in our global history.
Yeah, I think particularly in communities of color, because their lived reality is always there's always tension, you know, tension brought about by racism, economic disadvantages, poor schools, politics, whatever. There's always something social, political happening that they can be affected by, or some can ignore. Howard Deaner is basically an abstract artist, but this is her interpretation of Katrina. And she's used the arrow a lot of times for direction and energy in a lot of her work. And she did this piece when she was actually doing a more figurative piece about about her own. It was a self-portrait, Pendel DNA, which I think you also have in the collection.
Sorry.
But that was done in response, personal response to Katrina, and she visualized it through this print. So, and Howardina is a Philadelphian. She went to the Philadelphia High School for Girls. This is the one, the artist whose name escaped me a little while ago, Martha Jackson Jarvis.
Right.
And Martha is a ceramic artist, and she's well known for her installations, some quite large. So when she came to do this print in actually, I think it's 89, date may be reversed, but the idea was, I said, look, don't look to compromise your aesthetic and what you normally do. How can we take paper and ink and turn it into something that connects back to what you normally do, so you don't feel like you're compromising because you're making a print. And we came up with this project, which has about 9 separate sheets of paper which were printed on. And then she had the option to cut them up and assemble them. And she did about 5 or 6 variations and decided that this was the one that she wanted to edition. So it is an edition. It's got multiple components. The paper had to be folded, cut, torn, and so forth. But I like this print because it defies the normal notion of what a print must be or has to be. And the fact that it was dimensional. At one point, we did an exhibition at Brandywine with pieces borrowed from other collections where the prints were actually, all of them were 3-dimensional in some respect. So yeah, that's one of my favorites. I was happy that was in the exhibition.
So one of the things we talked about in thinking about this conversation was, how is Brandywine Workshop and Archive going to be different in a pandemic time in this era? And
Yeah.
one of the questions I had for you was, how are we going to be making prints? Is it possible to make a print like Martha's work and practice physical distancing, for example? This is something we're talking about a lot in the museum. How do we move art and handle art and honor the 6 feet distance we're recommended to have from one another? Is that even possible? How does that affect you and the work you've been doing with printmaking?
Well, it's a change. It's a new environment, a new way you have to think about how work gets done. When we started out, we did only silkscreen because it's all we could afford. And then we did litho. John Dowell's on the call. John Dowell and I, for about 3 years, experimented on offset lithography presses until we could afford to buy one. And then we bought this old press and we started doing offset because it was more efficient and the production time could be controlled better. But it meant that an artist would have to continuously be in process. It wasn't a case where you proof all the colors, show it to the artist, and the artist approves it, and then you print it. You had to be there in the physical space, watching the colors go down and say whether you liked it or not, because once you said you liked it, 50, 100 sheets may run through the press, and that's permanent. There's no going back and proofing and printing. So that was a process we used up until probably 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we decided that it was getting too difficult to manage having a master printer employed by Brandywine, giving us enough time to produce the work that we did, because most people want to pursue their own entrepreneurial interests. So we found that once our long-term printer, Bob Franklin, who had been with us for 27 years, passed away, we were always looking to bring on somebody who would give us the time. And most people at that point, 6, 7 years ago, were trying to develop their own workshops. So the board decided to abandon the in-house production and go outsource. And currently, last 2 years, we've been working with 3 print shops in Philadelphia, assigning the work to them. So that was another change. Now, COVID comes along, and you don't have the opportunity as a visiting arts program to bring your artists actually into the workshop and have some of that dynamic interaction happen between them that maybe alters their thinking, if no more than the color. You don't have a lot of that opportunity, but it doesn't mean you can't create prints. As we brought limitations onto the working practice of the artist, because we went to offset lithography. Now, COVID gives us the chance to work remotely. Working remote today is different than it was before because one of the tools that we're using is Zoom. So if an artist is if the printer's in the shop and the artist is in Los Angeles, he can show him the print as he's pulling it and get a proof of the color. And at the same time, because we're videotaping it, we get to document it, and that videotape can be edited. And when the print is produced, which we just did for Willie Cole and we're doing for Rasheed Johnson, is you have a video that accompanies the print, you know, with the artist making comment about what they're thinking, what's the inspiration for the print. So to get immediate real-time feedback is an advantage because of digital media we didn't have before. And I want to end by saying that a lot of people, a lot of schools have abandoned their traditional printmaking to go to digital printing. And so that's another impact on the field where a lot of artists can create an image, take it to a printer, have them print a couple proofs, and if they like it, say print me 3 or 4 more, but always have that file to go back and do more if it happens to be a print that's in demand.
Right.
So it's just that COVID is just another situation to be dealt with, but the way we function at Brandywine is every setback or every challenge creates opportunity for doing something a little bit different.
Well, that
Whether
shows
it's
in the,
better or
shows in
not.
the prints that you've produced, Allan.
Pardon me?
Pardon, excuse me. I was just saying that that really shows that flexibility in the prints that you've produced. I want to share another image if I can.
Sure.
And I thought I would ask, hold on one sec, that we give Paula an opportunity to share this work by Terry Atkins because she has often lectured on this work during the run of the show. And Paula, Abby, can you help me out and unmute Paula?
I think I'm unmuted. No?
Oh, great. Terrific. So Paula, our director of the Brodsky Center and also guest curator of this exhibition, Making Community, you have often said this is one of your favorite works by a favorite artist.
It is because I love how Terry Atkins in his career that was so unfortunately cut short has really embraced art as an experimental language and has inserted history in his work in a forceful way, trying to unearth chapters that had been buried. And in this particular print, not only he references the Egyptian culture that often comes along among in African-American culture, cultural products and references, but through the use of this blue hue that unfortunately through the screen you cannot see very well, but it's very strong, very luminous, as well as the silver, the bottom half silvery layer that is completely luminescent. But the blue references John Washington Carver, the artist and scientist, African-American artist and scientist, who actually discovered this blue hue and gave it and made it, created it as a hue, as a one of the colors blue, in reference to a blue that was found in the tombstone of Tutankhamun. And so Terry here is also really, along with this print, he has created other works. At that time, he created other works that referenced George Washington Carver and his discovery that preceded what all the Westerners know, the Yves Klein blue that was so important in Europe avant-garde of the 60s. So, but also I wanted to say that Terry Atkins studied as a printmaker, and as Allan said, these artists are all very good printmakers, and they came to do these works from a very complex perspective. And also Terry, in his writings and in his interviews, references John Dowell, who is on this call. And I was wondering if he would want to add something about Terry Atkins as well, if he can.
Let's just unmute John and see if he has something he wants to add.
Hey, John, I'm trying to unmute you.
Terry was just a very interesting, wonderful person that stopped to make you think about things, and very often in a conversation you go, oh yeah, I didn't realize it that way, you know. And so he was always challenging, and was a good, very, very, very stimulating person, you know, for me.
Thank you, John. I'm going to move on to the next slide. We could be here until Juneteenth, 2021, talking about this image by John Biggers. There's so much to say about it. Allan, why don't you share, do you have anything in addition that you'd like to share about this piece with the triptych model that John employed, which I don't think he did again. I think this was the only time that he worked in that way.
Yes, the only time he did a residency at Brandywine. And Brooke, you're really the expert on Biggers.
No, I'm not the expert on Biggers.
But on this piece, like I say, it's in 3 panels. And he told me the story that when he had an opportunity to travel Africa, particularly in the country of Ghana, everything meant something. Everything was a symbol for something. Yeah. And that's what he tried to put in his work. The cones, the stools, the elephant, the potbelly stove with the, you know, with the washing board, and it's called family art, you know. So it's about family. It's multi-generational, but for me, looking at it, it was almost like every time I looked at it, because we were more involved in getting it done, getting it printed. But then after it was printed and years go by, every time I look at it, I see something else. And I didn't see initially the figure laying behind the potbelly on flame at the bottom. There's a figure behind that grate. And it took me years before I actually saw it. I just thought it was a shadow or something in there. I never even looked deep into it. And so I think what Biggers asked of the viewer is to look deeper beyond the surface, and not just in what the image represents, but the theme of the image, you know. And this is like, you know, bringing his African heritage, his African-American heritage together, and expressing how important he thought family was, and what the family, how you define family, you know, thinking about community again. It's about love, it's about support, it's about paying respect to your ancestors and so forth. So this is, for me, it's one of the pieces where, depending upon what information and experience you bring to it, you'll have maybe a different interpretation of it. I think he does leave it open to things for people, not to be so literal and specific, but for people to, if you don't have a substantial amount of knowledge to make the interpretations, you're only going to see it as reflecting Africans and African Americans. You're going to see the color of the people, not the humanity of the people. So
something that was so important to John Biggers was the universal message.
Yes.
And in fact, for him, that circular motif that's kind of grounding the whole print really is the cycle of life, which is, of course, something that we all share. And that figure that you point out at the bottom, I don't know if I can multitask and show a laser, but that figure at the bottom, which is right here for everybody on the call, is also the first man. So he is he's in the birth cycle of the cycle of life, which is represented here. So this is birth, life, death, afterlife, birth, life, death, afterlife, which has a lot to do with several different African cultural cosmologies. But when I was looking at this print this morning, preparing for the talk, I was thinking a lot about a Zoom event we had last night, that PAFA hosted last night with Wang Tran, our archivist, and Dr. Brittany Webb, our curator of the John Roden collection. Because Brittany has really connected Roden's international travels with his aesthetic decisions and material choices. And it's a very exciting journey to be on, to see how his global experiences, Roden's global experiences, have played a role in the career that he built for himself. And I was thinking a lot about how for John it was exactly the same. His first trip to West Africa in the late 50s really shifted his work entirely and got him interested also in a spirituality that was grounded in sacred geometry. And that all happened after those initial trips and a lengthy trip to many of the countries in West Africa with his wife Hazel in the 1950s. And this print really addresses a lot of the ways in which John was so excited by African belief systems. And because, Allan, you started with the cooking pot and the washboard right down here, he often talked about those two objects being anthropomorphized into pregnant women and grandmothers. That it was at one and the same time the belly of a pregnant woman and also the site of many grandmothers' work. So I know that we're getting close to our time, and I have one more slide to show before we stop the slideshow. Whoops, now I have to get out of that. Okay, and into this. There we go. As I mentioned at the start of the PowerPoint, the project was really strengthened and sped up by the work of TK Smith and Nzinga Simmons as managed by Dr. Brittany Webb, who you see TK to the left, if you're looking at the same screen that I am, Nzinga in the center, and then Dr. Brittany Webb to the right. And to acknowledge that this partnership, Allan, between our two organizations, between PAFA and Brandywine, really involved so many different people and led to so many other great outcomes and projects. I just felt like that was an important aspect to share in the talk this morning. So Abby, somehow I can't get rid of my laser to close out of the power. There we go. Okay, good. I thought I was a Zoom expert. Now I'm no longer. Now I realize I still have things to learn. Allan, thank you so much. We are, believe it or not, this is how quick Culture and Coffee is. We're coming to the close of our time together this morning. And at PAFA, we like to respect everybody's time. But Winston, I see you right there. And I would love it if you have anything that you want to share about Allan's awesomeness, about the gift to PAFA, the importance of Brandywine.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I think you have to speak up just a little bit more, Winston.
Yeah, well, thank you, Brooke and Abby, and obviously, wanted to just talk about why Carolyn and I made this particular gift. And, right off the top, as many of you know, I'm on the board of trustees of PAFA. I'm also a member of the collections committee. And part of what I have the pleasure of is where Brooke brings and has, the curators present quarterly acquisitions that come and will be acquired by and what I've learned through that is first, and Brooke mentioned it, but I want to re-emphasize this. The data shows that the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts in any given year is either the #1 or #2 museum that acquires works by African Americans and by women. And that has really positioned PAFA from a strategic standpoint. It's not by accident. And actually, it's part of the entire strategic plan of PAFA to make sure that the museum and the collection, and as well the exhibition, are showing the works of groups of people that had been underrepresented, frankly, in the museum community across the United States. So I'm very proud of being a member of the Board of Trustees of PAFA, the committee, the curators that positioned PAFA to be the #1 museum in the acquisition of works by women and acquisition of works by African Americans. What it also happens is that, fortunately, on the committee, I get to see who gives. And what I learned was that a number of the trustees, and many likewise have collections, give their collections or part of their collections to PAFA. And for a host of reasons, obviously. My wife and I wanted to, as well as, frankly, being a trustee, have a legacy at PAFA. And we wanted the legacy to be strategic. And what I meant by that is, once I understood the importance of PAFA's overall mission of continuing to be that institution in America that would collect and also have exhibition of African American works by African Americans and works by women. And frankly, knowing Allan Edmunds, my wife and I acquired 56 works from the Brandywine workshop. We then felt that, if you've been to our home, we don't have the room for 56 works. And as a result, we felt that the best thing for us would be to donate, to give a gift to PAFA. Originally, the gift was going to be 30 works, but as it turned out, once Jody and TK and Brooke and Asinka and Sarah and Paula began to see the set of works that were among the 56 that we had acquired, the list continued to grow, ultimately to 36 works, which were selected in a very rigorous process, by the way, by PAFA. These works that you're seeing are iconic. The Biggers work is an iconic work, as well as the Selmella Lewis, Palladino Mandel, the Wadsworth works. And what I mean by iconic is that in the future, as PAFA has different exhibitions, those works will be included because they tell a story, and a very important story, that curators today and as well in the future will want to build on. Also, by the way, when I came and presented, this entire idea to PAFA, talking both to and as well to Brooke, the Philadelphia Museum of Art had, and actually Allan knows better than I think it was about 15 years ago, had an exhibition of work from the Brandywine workshop. What I then realized were a few things. That the Brandywine workshop had a set of what they call affiliated institutions. As it turns out, PMA one, the Arizona State is another, the consortium in Atlanta of HBCUs is another. And And what then happened was that, frankly, I wanted to make sure that PAFA was included. So that was one of the considerations that we had as Allan and I looked at making this gift, where actually Allan had served on the school committee and had a connection with PAFA, that we would then have this set of works donated to PAFA. We're very pleased with the exhibition. Obviously, Brooke mentioned it's not going to be available shown, but Paula has done just a fabulous job and the entire exhibition of making community the fabulously beautiful 100 works. Almost, I think, of those works are works by African American, and incidentally, you know, it's a range of works. You've got Wadsworth, Terrell, you've got Marshall in it, and also what is important as well is that this particular exhibition continues that legacy that Allan, you know, created at Brandywine, and now many of these artists that are included in this exhibition, this is the first time that their works are and have been acquired by a major art museum in the United States. In the art world, that's a big deal. That became another reason why Carol and I wanted to do this, because right before this, another institution had acquired a significant number of works, and that was the Harvard University, that while we were in the midst of vetting through our 56 works, Harvard, I believe, acquired 80.
Thank you, Winston, so very much. And even though Making Community, our print show, a celebration of new acquisitions, isn't going to reopen due to COVID-19, and making sure that our museum opens safely for everyone in Philadelphia and beyond. The work is in our permanent collection now, so you know that it's going to come out again, and you know that Jody's going to have ideas for exhibiting the work in different ways, and Brittany will, and Anna will, and hopefully future colleagues of ours will also engage in this work moving forward. I do want to respect the timeline and everybody's day. It is a holiday. I'm so grateful for you joining us this morning on Juneteenth. Allan, thank you so much. Will everybody join me in a Zoom applause for Allan and Brandywine and all that he does here in Philadelphia? Allan, it's just a privilege to be a partner with you. So thank you for your time this morning. We need more time to talk about Artura and ideas, the new projects that you're implementing. And so we'll get back to that another time. Abby and I love to let everybody say a collective so long. So she's going to unmute everyone and we can all sign off. As we sign off, I expect some of you to hover around for a minute or two. And thank you all so much for joining PAFA this morning. Have a great weekend and celebrate Juneteenth. Thank you so much.
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself as you go. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. That's how it goes. Yeah, unmute yourself as
Thank you. Goodbye.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you. Allan, thank
Great
you.
presentation.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Paula.
Bye.
Thanks, Paula.
Bye. Bye. Bye, Nicole.
Okay, go enjoy your photo.
Sure thing.
Oh, I see Charles on the phone. Oh, Charles, how nice of you to join us. I think he's muted, but it's really nice to see you, Charles. And there's Shelly. Hi, Shelly.
Hey,
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. How are you guys doing?
Everybody on the PAFA team is healthy, so that's the best
Good.
news.
Good. I have to thank Ruth for telling me about this event. I just asked Abby to get me on the email list. I didn't know, I wouldn't have known about this if it weren't for Ruth. So thank you, Ruth.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you, Ruth.